Our Indiana Prosperity 2035 Vision Plan contains these 6 pillars that have been defined as key to Indiana's future economic success and anchor our overall strategy. And we now are inviting up our distinguished panel of caucus leaders, maybe still missing one, but in the interest of time, maybe we'll get going. We have Senate President Pro Tem Bray. We have Senate Minority Leader Shelli Yoder and House Minority Leader GiaQuinta. And I know the speaker will probably be here momentarily. So a couple of housekeeping things while we get started. If you have a question, you can submit it via your phone. Use the QR code at your table or go to slido.com and enter the code LP26. We will try to get in as many of these questions as possible after we go through some of our prepared questions. So to start, and we do this every year, and I always ask this every year, give each of you an opportunity to start with a brief opening statement before we get to questions. So Senator Bray, you want to start?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you. Thanks. Nice to be with you all this morning. I spoke to the speaker just a few moments ago. He truly is stuck in traffic. As a result of that, he said I could speak for him, so I'm going to have a couple announcements to make this morning. But anyway, nice to be with you all today. Obviously, this is a strange build-up to the legislative session, but we're going to working through that to talk about some things that aren't redistricting. We might get into that a little bit today, which is fine, but some of the things that we're looking at for priorities are things like crime. You might remember back in 2003, Senator Cook had a bill actually a resolution to amend the Constitution to change the bail under our state constitution, so that right now you can deny bail for murder and treason. This would expand that to other cases in the event that the proof was evident and that there was clear and convincing evidence that there was not a way to keep the public or members of the public safe in the event that the person was let out. So this would be the second round of that constitutional amendment. If it passed again in the exact same form that it did in 23, then it would go on to a referendum in the fall of 26. So you'll see us talk about that. We'll talk a little bit more, again, as we have in the past, about some Medicaid and trying to rein in those costs so we can ensure that people who need it are on it and the people who aren't, to try and bring some integrity and fidelity to that program, primarily because we need to save the money for the people who need it, and then the rest of the money for other projects in the state that are uber important, like our education space. As I've given this number out before, but I'll do it again just to highlight it. From 1965 until 2021, Medicaid grew from $0, if you think of zero at the start, to 21, it was $5 billion. From 21 to 25, it went from $5 billion to $10 billion. Everybody in this room understands how unsustainable that is, so it's something that we're taking a very serious look at. Then we'll do some other things with regard to economy and inflation and the challenges that people are facing right now. So those are my opening comments. Happy to be here with you all and look forward to the panel.
Thank you, Senator Bray. Senator Yoder?
I don't know how close I need to. Oh, that's good. Thank you for inviting me. Shelli Yoder, serving as Senate Minority Leader for the Indiana Senate Democratic Caucus. It's great to be here. I know that our caucus will be laser focused on issues of affordability and the economy. In addition to the redistricting conversations, most and all of our conversations have really revolved around the impact that the inaffordability is having on so many families across the state, but also for businesses as well. And so we will be looking specifically at ways that we can address utility costs for residents and for businesses. We'll also be looking at housing affordability and finding ways to boost construction in our communities across the state in a way that both does alleviate the cost burden, but also provide more tools in the toolbox, so to speak, for communities across Indiana. We will also be looking, we'll continue to look at ways that we can fix the childcare crisis in this state. Now, that is a pocketbook issue for too many Hoosier families. We have families who are asking, is there a way that we could have a childcare benefit and risk not taking a healthcare benefit? I mean, the fact that families are asking that question is a wake-up call that they have to make a choice of one or the other when we know families need both. But it's just far too expensive. So we've been really trying to come up with some policy ideas around that space. And we will also be looking at healthcare expenses as well. Healthcare affordability continues to be a serious challenge for many, many Hoosiers in this state. And I don't know about you, but you know, the healthcare premiums for so many Hoosiers went up. You are the ones who are providing that, and you are looking at what more can we do, but it's coming at a time when so many Hoosiers are asking, how do we get through the next year with these 20, 30% increases in premiums and healthcare expenses. So those are a few of the policy areas that we'll be focused on, but really in the crosshair is affordability for Hoosiers. And I know you are in it for Hoosier families asking those same questions when you're seeing increase in expenses on your end too. But it's going to be, you know, a tough session. It's a short session, so we had to look at all of our policies in a way that isn't going to have a fiscal impact. And that's always unique in its challenges. And our caucus is ready to roll up our sleeves and get busy doing the good work of the people. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Senator Yoder. Leader GiaQuinta?
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks, Vanessa, to you and your team. I really appreciate the fact that you've gotten out all parts of the state, meeting with legislators. We've had many conversations through the course of your tenure here, so I really appreciate the job that you're doing and the great work of your team, so appreciate that, especially keeping us up to date on your issues and your concerns. You know, when it comes to the talk of affordability, my comments that I gave after the last election, I'm talking about the one coming off of 2024, you know, I said about going door to door and talking to constituents, and then frankly, from some of the election results in 24, you know, I knew what was on voters' mind, and that was the high cost of living, affordability. I've been talking about, I opened my remarks with that last January, and I don't think too much, frankly, has changed. So I'm glad to hear we're kind of maybe all on the same page now with that, with regards to utility costs, healthcare costs, childcare costs, and those sorts of things, housing affordability. And then, of course, we always want to make sure that we're, as we look now, we're going to strengthen quality of life. And I think we'll probably get into these answers with your questions, but there's nothing that's more important than a strong education system in the state. And then, of course, I always believe that starts at the earliest opportunities with fully funding pre-K, things like that. So those are some of the things we'll continue to talk about, and looking forward to the rest of this morning and getting started in session in January. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, maybe we'll start on the topic of healthcare and in particular Medicaid. And Senator Bray, maybe go back to you, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about how you see the Medicaid funding issue playing out in the legislature in the next session. As you mentioned, it is a significant and growing portion of the state's budget, and there's certainly interplay with kind of federal funding in particular because of the One Big Beautiful Bill and some of the changes there. So would love to get your perspective and also our other panelists on kind of how you see the General Assembly addressing that, and in particular around kind of this issue of Medicaid reimbursement rates. And I think for us, when we think about that, we also think about the potential cost shift to employers, and so how we navigate that.
Well, as I said, you know, you'll see us focus a little bit with regard to Medicaid on just trying to ensure that the people that are receiving it right now are the people that are supposed to be receiving it, that qualify, haven't grown income-wise out of the program, and trying to make sure we do that and execute that program with as much fidelity as we can. Obviously, there's a large interest in looking at the Medicaid reimbursement. That's something that we have to take in mind. We sort of got a balance here that's really, really tricky, because we're trying to curb those Medicaid costs, which are trying to grow exponentially out of control. And if we were going to increase those costs, that would be an additional cost to the state of Indiana. I agree and understand that there's a cost shift there. So you'll see us just really try to find a balance in that space.
Any other comments on Medicaid?
Was specifically on Medicaid, things like that. Well, I know that we've tried in the past, and I was trying to think back to this too. I think in maybe the 23 budget, there was some increase. I'm not sure if that ever, those numbers were ever realized, but certainly there's so much benefit to this. I mean, it's now all providers have been concerned, and rightly so, about reimbursement rates and things like that. And I do think it then helps. When we do that, it does better, of course, in the long run for Medicaid services in general, but then it also helps them keep down insurance costs, things like that. So, and of course, it provides frankly, for a better, healthier Indiana. So anything that we can do, I think, in that regard to help is, will be, I think we'll be encouraged by folks, and I hope we can do that.
Great. One area of legislation that our caucus is working on is finding ways that we can, with FSSA, bring a little bit of clarity, transparency, and I don't know if it's accountability, but just allowing when letters go out, some of the communication is rather confusing to people who receive these letters, and all it does, it ends up creating more what you call churn, more administrative oversight, which then those mistakes, those errors, being thrown off Medicaid unnecessarily so, and then having to get back on Medicaid, all of that actually drives up costs of Medicaid. And so we have a bill that we will be introducing that sort of addresses what we've been hearing from many stakeholders in this space that help Medicaid customers be able to have a little bit of transparency, cleaning up some of the ways in which Medicaid recipients are communicated with, and hopefully reduce those costs in more of an administrative way, because we realize that we have, we talked so much at length last session about the rising costs in Medicaid, but our approach to it might inadvertently raise those costs even more when we don't intend to. Healthcare is interesting. Where do you want to look at, where do you want to approach the question of affordability? Because as you lose access to care, it then drives those expenses in other areas. So I know that our caucus is very concerned about it and wants to make sure that we're approaching it in a way that is both smart, but also gets us to where we're trying to do and address the rising costs of healthcare.
Well, and maybe just to zoom out a little bit on healthcare overall and talking about access in particular in rural areas of the state, as well as affordability, would love perspectives from each of you on kind of what we do to continue to address some of those access and affordability issues. We've been talking here at the chamber about direct-to-employer networks as a way to help with cost containment. We also, some of you know, we offer a small business health insurance plan for 2 to 50 employees, chamber care, and we recently moved providers to ensure that we were getting the best value and were able to deliver 0% premium increases there. So something that we hear a lot about, and would love any other perspective on how you as leaders are thinking about that in the next legislative session.
I'm just here to listen.
Okay. I'll come back to you later.
Now, first of all, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Speaker.
I would do an opening 2 minutes.
I don't need an opening 2 minutes. I'm just here to apologize, and I'll listen. Sorry about being late.
It's all Pressel's fault. He passed the bill and wrote something.
They should never put they can't have an accident on the I-69, 465, the way we come down on the ramp. That's impossible.
That's right.
Because that's crazy, so my apologies for that. I think, we're excited about more direct employer. We want to do what we can to facilitate that. I think that model makes a lot of sense. We've also focused on ICRA accounts that allow, I think one of the things we want to continue to focus on as a caucus is how do you put the individual more into the game on healthcare costs. The fact of the matter is right now, oftentimes the person that's receiving the healthcare costs really doesn't have a lot of financial skin in that game. And because, they're either on a government program or employer paid program. And so to think about that more holistically, to say, how do we make people, see their contribution to this is very, very important. And I think it goes back to, direct to employer and ICRA type models.
Any other thoughts? Healthcare before we move?
Well, I'll say one more thing. Excitingly, over last session, we had a bill that, a couple of sessions ago, we passed out of the legislature, a bill that expanded access to Medicaid for new moms for a whole year. And that 12-month expansion, really good for moms and for babies in Indiana. What was happening was that access to care was being extended out. So a new mom wasn't actually being followed up with right away. And so those 12 months, she was actually not getting the access to care and that benefit that I know the legislature intended, so we can improve our maternal and infant health and mortality outcomes. So last year we filed a bill, Senator Jackson filed a bill that addressed this and required a requirement of the time in which a new mom is reached out to our Medicaid customers. And we didn't get that through last year. We studied it over the interim, and that bill will be reintroduced again this next session. And I really hope that we can get that done. If we decided as a legislature that we were going to expand those benefits to a full 12 months, we definitely want our new moms being able to benefit from that expansion. So I look forward to working together, making that happen.
Dennis, can I one comment too? First of all, I agree with the speaker that the direct employer piece is a really good idea, and happy to play a role if we can to help accommodate that. One thing, just by way of a perspective, though, I think, we've in the General Assembly been working on the cost of healthcare since at least 2019. Done lots of things that have tried to bring some transparency so people can understand what those costs are. The speaker's right. A lot of people patients don't necessarily have their own skin in the game. So trying to bring a little bit of that to bear so people can make that cost and quality assessment like they do when they go to the grocery store. Difficult to do in the healthcare space because it's so complex, but just hesitate or kind of resist, if you will, the urge to every year come up with lots of new ideas, because the healthcare space, like I said, is extremely complicated. And if we pass a really good bill in 2024, it's not firing on all pistons yet in 2025. This is a large ship and it takes a while to turn it. So we need to continue to watch what we have done, see what's become effective, and see maybe what's not effective. Like I've been told of late that the all-payer claims database that we created now a number of years ago is not particularly useful or particularly used. We kind of need to figure out why that is, and if there's a way that we can help bring that, make it more usable or more user-friendly, because there's a cost to putting that together. And if it's not useful, we don't want to continue on it. So we need to be analytical about what we have done to see what's working and what's not.
Great.
Vanessa, can I just add just one real quick? Senator Bray's right. Over the last few sessions, we've been focusing primarily really on hospitals. And I think that they've done a good job, or at least working toward these goals of themselves of trying to lower costs. And while at the same time asking some of the hospitals to pick up the slack, if you will, in some of the areas where we don't have healthcare access. And so trying to balance the needs of keeping costs down and building hospitals in areas where at least providing care where they don't have that access in some of the rural areas. I think that at least working toward those goals. And then the other thing too is just, probably want to take a look at the insurance role in the state and the insurance companies and record profits there that we're seeing and what can we do there. So that, you're probably right. It's going to be a short session, obviously, maybe not a lot of time, but at least we can start some of those discussions. Thanks.
Okay, well, now that we have all of our panelists here, I'm going to go back to a general question. Obviously, I think one of the topics that's on everybody's mind is when is session starting in December or not? And so obviously, there's lots of moving parts, lots of updates going on, evolving situation. And I think for us, one of the issues outside of redistricting, but the policy issue around tax conformity and OB3, and kind of are there things that, what are the tax provisions in that federal bill that we need to conform to or not, or decouple? And so would ask maybe Speaker Huston and Senator Bray to speak to anything they want to share related to schedule and also kind of the tax conformity.
I'm happy to talk about tax conformity. Look, I mean, we've been doing analysis with our Senate partners and with the administration on, what we will couple and what we will decouple with. Obviously, we want to make it as easy on Hoosier taxpayers as possible. So we are conscientious of that and timing and those types of things. There'll need to be some discussions on a couple things because, frankly put, they're a pretty big impact to the state general fund, and we, we're sure we're going to be consistent in talking about not doing fiscal bills that have big fiscals or have fiscals. So I think we'll get that done. There'll just be some conversations around what we're going to decouple and couple with.
I'll say too, with regard to that, some of the tax conformity is fairly simple and fairly straightforward. Some of it's there's a lot of judgment call in it. We're still in the process, at least from my perspective, of analyzing that to figure out exactly what that cost is and making sure that we understand what those changes are and what the impact might be. Typically when you have federal legislation change like this, it comes around and then we have to decide whether or not we want to conform or not, or couple or decouple with whatever provisions of the federal law, because we're closely tied together, of course. We don't typically come in the special session for that. We do it early in January. We understand we have to do it relatively quickly and get it out the door into the governor's desk so that people can begin to plan on the tax season that is coming up quickly in 2026. So we'll do that. It's our anticipation, as I've said last week, that we're going to come in January the 5th, and so we'll work on that in earnest. The other advantage of that is that we'll see, we'll have a fiscal or economic forecast in December that we'll also be able to use to help make these decisions, which I think is really helpful.
And I know on the coupling or conforming or decoupling, bonus depreciation is one of the provisions that we've heard a lot about. Any other provisions that you're kind of particularly focused on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that no tax on tips and the overtime pay should be considered. I readily admit I haven't really, thoroughly thought through a lot of that stuff with this bill, but I know it's quite a bit of money that's tax breaks, if you will. So, but there's certainly something I think we should seriously consider.
So if we do full conformity, it will be about a $319 million price tag over the next 3 years for Indiana, and for our local communities, about $43 million over the next 3 years. And on the heels of SEA 1 that in the State House that we passed last year, that reduction in revenue for local communities, counties, and municipalities is a lot. You think about 43 million over 3 years, and you're like, well, that's a lot of money. And when they're already looking at having to reduce so much and the impact of SEA 1, I think we're going to have to look at exactly where we're going to make those changes and conform, whether or not we do that fully or not. But I guess we'll wait and see what we look at in the bill that we're going to be discussing. I don't know when, but either. Hopefully, first of the year.
Sometime soon. Well, and I guess just maybe a follow-up related to SE1, one of the things in that bill that we, as the Indiana Chamber, were very supportive of were the changes to business personal property tax. And so obviously there's certainly local concerns and kind of issues that need to be worked through. Any thoughts? We've heard discussions of kind of updates or changes to SEA1. Anything that I guess either of the leaders want to talk about in that regard?
So first of all, I want to say kudos to Senator Holman as well as Representative Thompson for the work that they've done. And I've had conversations with lots of local governments and lots of folks interested in SE1. Yeah, what I think you'll see here are some, in fact, I've asked local government folks to kind of get together a list of things they think need to be changed. We got a big list of things that need to be changed, but things that need to be tweaked, things that will just make it work a little bit better. We're not talking, in my opinion, at least about wholesale change, but rather tweaks to make it true up and work a little bit better. I think you'll see Senator Holman talk, and he's interested in some a review of the assessment process as well. So those are just a couple things you might see us discuss.
Yeah, I would say we're right along with what Senator Bray said. We will probably have some tweaks, and I think Chairman Thompson and Senator Holden are working around what those tweaks are. Look, I think one, this is a balancing act on SEA1. I think we all have to appreciate that. We want to make sure, we heard loud and clear from individual property tax homeowners that they were frustrated with the continual increase in their property tax bills, and I think we addressed that in a solid and measured way. I think we've given tools to local units of government to be able to increase their revenues with the support of their community. And I think the most important thing that I think has been the most frustrating thing for me that just doesn't get mentioned is, look, if you're a community that's growing and your community that is trying to do what it can to grow their community, grow their AV, you're rewarded in this new system. You are absolutely rewarded in this new system. And there were unfortunately some unintended, in my opinion, improper incentives in the old property tax system. And what we really want to do is, we want to reward communities that are growing. As your community grows, that amortizes the cost of services across a bigger number of taxpayers, bigger AV, and that's a positive. So I think, we've had an opportunity in that bill to, I think, create a better long-term property tax system that matches what I think we want for the state of Indiana. And as I talk to, I know Senator Bray is met, I'm sure Leader GiaQuinta and Senator Yoder, with tons of locals, and that's the message we've been giving them, and we look forward to working with them on the tweaks. And we know, we'll continue to work with you guys in 2027 on, we know that the business personal property tax, there's some stuff around there that both the locals and the business community want to work their way through, and we know that'll be on the agenda for 2027.
That's great. Well, and maybe one follow-up along those lines, when we think about fiscal realities and taxpayer dollars needing to go further, I think there's been discussions and something that the Indiana Chamber's been involved around previously around local government modernization and just thinking about resource allocations there and how to find efficiencies. And we've heard some talk with different legislators about maybe kind of wanting to address some of those things. And any color or thoughts that anyone wants to add there?
Sure. I'm going to get back real quick to the first part, and I'll move to the second, just on Senate Rule Act 1. Listening to AIM, I think, has some interesting list of things that could be some improvements to the bill. One of them is with regards to, I think, councils have to approve every year, and that's, I think, getting them in the way of some bonding projects that they want to do. So they're looks for a little, they would like some more stability there in that range. I wrote down a note, police should be included in the local income tax definition. Right now, only fire and EMS can be funded through LIT. So there's some things in there. I think they've come up with some pretty good ideas as how to improve SEA1. But having said all that too, local governments are really, they're there to provide good services. And as we know, most of these local budgets, it's 70% goes to mostly public safety. And so they're now having to kind of figure out how we're going to deal with less. So there's certainly some challenges there, particularly as we get later into it, maybe not the first year, but the second year, it's going to be even a bigger hit. So, and then to your next question, yeah, I mean, there's certainly some things that can be done innovation-wise, for certain, particularly when it comes to, consolidation. There are certain water districts around the state that have done a nice job with some things, working with reaching out to their neighbors around their areas with regards to sharing of services with water and sewer and things like that. Obviously, I'm sure there'll be talk of school districts and things like that, but as far as how local governments can work together, I'm sure there's other opportunities there with regards to not so much maybe consolidation, but how can they partner in different ways with whether it's smaller communities working with the bigger communities, anything that we can do, which I think in the long run will help those smaller communities even grow and do much better.
I will say, I'm going to regret this comment. I am cautiously optimistic. How about that? About making some progress in this. And by the way, not doing it to people, but with people. I think, we have a lot of government, local government in Indiana, a lot. And we've talked about this, Chambers led on this for a number of years. And I think, with changes in population trends, looking at the types of services that are offered, I think we are having better discussions with our partners in this. Again, it's not going to be reinventing the wheel. It's not going to be eliminating a whole host of levels of government. Whatever my opinion might be of that, that's not where we're going to end. But I think, there's some small steps that we can take. There'll be positive steps. I think that will allow us to move forward in having this discussion. Again, I'm grateful for the partners that we have in this, the local government partners who are working on their way through this with us, to talk about these types of things, because I think it's been a little frustrating for all of us that we've been having this discussion for 20 plus years and literally made, really little to no progress.
Well, I'm always a glass half full person, so I'll join you in
Well,
that.
we'll see. Figure out where we are then.
Okay, maybe moving into workforce and education, obviously a topic that employers in this state cares a lot about. As Senator Bray, you mentioned education, a significant portion of the state budget too. So have a couple questions here. We continue to talk about, how Indiana has talent challenges, right? We don't always have the workers with the skills that they need in the places that we need them, and would love to hear each of your perspectives on strategies that help strengthen Indiana's workforce and attract those high growth industries. I know I was with Speaker Huston and Senator Bray on Friday with the Indiana Career Apprenticeship Pathway kind of initiative, and that is one thing that I feel like a lot of us in the state are leaning in around to help make sure that there is that talent pipeline and students are getting the skills they need and more work-based learning opportunities that ties to the high school diploma redesign and everything else. But would love to get all of your perspective on this topic.
Well, I'll just hit on that. I was going to, you sort of stole my lead, I guess, but no, that's exactly right. The Indiana Career Apprenticeship Pathway, I think, is a fantastic option to try and get kids skilled up into the workforce in all sorts of ways. I mean, what we're standing up right now are professions like banking, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, lots of things that show, I think, a lot of potential to get kids trained up starting in high school, juniors and seniors in high school, and then moving into the workforce, led by employers, so that that the skills that they're learning are skills that are absolutely currently used in the workforce, which has been a problem that we've had over the past number of years, because it's not even a cut on schools at all, but it's really difficult for them to keep up and be on the same level of technology that the industry is right now. It just doesn't work that way, and so this is an opportunity to get that done. So I'm very bullish on that and look forward to continuing to work through that and see it to a success.
I was just going to add that as someone who is in the class, is in the classroom and heading back to go be in the classroom, again and again, we hear from businesses, and of course, I'm in the sort of higher ed space, so from recruiters, is we do need to teach to skills. I actually teach a very skills-based course, but we cannot lose track, and we need to have balance with also prioritizing teaching critical thinking and those higher level skills, because technology is changing so rapidly. We hear from employers, as a matter of fact, in accounting, for example, they don't need to know certain formulas because we will teach them what they need to know, but we need a workforce that knows how to work with teams, knows how to engage with people, knows how to problem solve, have higher level critical thinking skills. And so we definitely need that balance. Both, we've made these changes and it is quick. Senator Bray was saying, let's not judge something too fast. Let's see how it works out. But we cannot lose sight of the importance of those other skills that we need to be teaching young people from pre-K, and not losing that in this state, but on through adulthood, being able to quickly be nimble and skill up. So while we need those skills, we have to also realize that the important thing here is teaching from a very young age. How do you solve problems? I know that we probably want to get to AI, but how do we teach our citizens of Indiana how to engage in AI, because it's here, it's changing every day, and that is a really important conversation we need to be having, because it's not so much, do I know how to do X, Y, and Z? It's more like, can I problem solve if that X, Y, and Z changes to solve that next problem?
Well, when it comes to attracting talent, it's a interesting question. I think there's a lot of answers, but when it comes to education, I think if we don't start at an early age and really invest in a robust pre-K program, that's where it all starts for me. And the more, the better we can do with these early kids and get them educated and go through, from third grade on up high school and graduation, the better off those students will be, and the better off hopefully Indiana will be. But quality of life really is the whole key, in my opinion, to attracting talent here in Indiana. When I think back to where the growth has been in Indiana over the last 20, 25 years, we think about, obviously not just Indianapolis, but the areas around Indy, those areas that are around heavy populated areas. And frankly, I think it's when you ask young people, why are you there? And they'll say, well, that's where I want to be. And that's where things are. And that's where it's fun to be in these areas. And I can walk to from my house somewhere in Carmel to downtown. And so we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to improve the quality of life here in Indiana so that young people will stay here. And that if you have talent, you'll attract the businesses. Obviously, the tricky part is rural Indiana is still struggling. And that's some things I think we really have to work with there, and probably more investment in the education space there in rural Indiana.
Speaker.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to kind of piggyback a little bit on Senator Yoder's comments. So, I think this has to be employer-led in the entire discussion, because look, I mean, there's an interesting story this weekend. I think it was Ford who said they can't find $120,000 a year mechanics. At the same point, another story in the Journal says we have a 6-year glut of college graduates. Like, we're literally graduating kids in the worst job market for college graduates this year than recent history. And a lot of this is AI, a lot of this is a change in the economy, but I guess, employers have to push back into the education system and say, these are the things that we need, because as we talked a little bit about on Friday, the problem, right, sits in the fact that education, whether it's a high school or higher ed, and a strong proponent of both, but the fact of the matter is they're going to want to do the same thing they've always done, because we're all that creature. And the unfortunate thing is that just doesn't work right now. Like, and I don't, I'm not pessimistic about AI. I think, I ask my kids who are much more computer savvy than me, and they use it all the time, and it feels like they're using it for positive things. But I think, to say, well, we've always had this degree program, or we've always had this type of diploma, and say that's going to work today, I think it's just, it's a failed strategy. I think you're starting to see the data that shows it. I am, by all accounts, a huge liberal arts fan. I think, as Senator Yoder noted, I think those are very, very important skills. I think you can teach those skills easily in high school too, while also learning other skills that are directly into the workforce skills. I think higher ed needs to really think about, like, if you watch just the raw economics of higher ed, and then you look at what where their graduates are going, they have to retool themselves into the degree programs and what they're offering, because you just simply put, you can't, there's way too many kids are walking out of the system with debt and then no place to, no high-end job that's going to help, them establish a lifestyle that I think we'd all like for our kids to have.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think evolution and kind of responding to making sure what the employer's needs are connecting to the institutions of higher education, and we are kind of helping bridge that gap and bringing folks together, which is, I think, one of the things that we try to do at the Indiana Chamber. So I very much appreciate those comments. So one other, just, I guess, education point that multiple folks touched on, early learning in pre-K. We saw in some of the scorecard metrics that we presented earlier that, we have a goal of increasing that amount of 3- and 4-year-olds in educational opportunities. We have still work to do there. There's a lot of talking about employers leaning in. I think a lot of work going on in various parts of the state to kind of think about how to bring the private sector and into the conversation. I'm looking at Ron Turpin over there up in Northeast Indiana. I know they have a model, kind of a tri-share model that's being worked on. We had our summit, as was mentioned, our childcare summit last week. I know there's some conversations about SGOs and scholarship granting organizations as another means to try to get more kind of resources into the system. But we continue to hear about this issue from the employer perspective, while also recognizing we need to be part of the solution. And so kind of would want to continue working with the legislature. There's been some efforts over the last couple of sessions to move the ball in certain ways. But any advice or thoughts that you have for us and ways that we can continue engaging to move that issue forward? Anyone?
Well, we have, in the legislature over the last several years, we've tried to work hard on this issue. Primarily what we've tried to do is cut regulations. I think I've heard the speakers say, and I completely agree, that for a while, years ago, we tried to add quality and safety to the daycare and preschool programs, which is a laudatory goal. But when you do that, you make it more expensive. And when you make it more expensive, it's then all of a sudden harder to attain. So I think in some way we choked off the supply there. And we've been trying to go back and make thoughtful, reasonable, kind of deregulatory moves to kind of make that a little bit less expensive. That hasn't solved the problem in its entirety at all, for sure. I was attended a panel, a couple of months ago with people that were in for preschool and daycare, and all they wanted was more money from the state. That's probably not going to happen. At least it's going to be very limited. So y'all need to understand that. I would encourage businesses to figure out what role they can play in this, because I think they're going to have to play a role too. And Vanessa, you mentioned Ron Turpin, Northeast Indiana. That tri-share model is a neat idea that a lot of people ought to be looking at. I think that's a really thoughtful way to get parents, businesses, maybe nonprofits, and government involved in what that can look like.
Yeah. I think last session, Representative Dan Chesser had filed a tri-share bill, and hopefully we'll do that again this year. But I think it's a good idea. I've talked to some other businesses, especially those that have, frankly, certainly are in a very close area, and they've talked to me about how can we get together and what's the best possible way that we can work to with our neighboring businesses to be able to offer childcare services. I do appreciate the fact the chamber has really been a leader on this the last few years, advocating for affordable childcare. I have gone to a couple different places over the summer, and I know we've talked about this before with COVID dollars, that without the COVID dollars now we have to come down a little bit, but actually we're below now the levels of offering vouchers where we were post COVID. So I think we certainly need to look at that, the dollars there, because I asked, I said, well, where are these young kids going? Where are the parents sending them? And I really didn't have an answer. It's either family or friends. And then you run into the issue that there's, those places are unregulated and we don't really know what's happening there. So you run into kind of a safety issue there. So childcare affordability is going to be a number one topic, one of our topics for us, for our caucus coming up this session.
Thank you. I would add to the conversation that over the last year, our caucus, myself, we've attended, including the Early Childhood Learning Summit that happened here a week ago in this very room, asking these questions. And what we're hearing is so much of this is being pushed on to businesses to address this. And the challenge there is, I mean, bless you, because you certainly have stepped up like you always do, but in this space, the problem is finding and keeping good quality professionals in this space, the teachers who are teaching in the early learning space. And professionalizing the career is what I'm hearing across the board. And so it connects with that pathway that we've been talking about in terms of skill, but also just how, being able to pay a wage that these individuals can actually see it as a career. We talk a lot about K through 12 with teacher pay, but it's really tough with in the space of pre-K. But these are individuals who see it as that it is a profession and talking about it in ways that treats it that way. When we talk about so many families are looking to family and friends of caring for their children, many states have codified into their state statute those those kindergarten readiness indicators so that parents know what is expected of them. We have them floating around. Some people know them, some people don't. But how do we get those indicators into the hands of parents to make sure it's clear from 0 to 1, this is what your child needs to do to set them up to get prepared for kindergarten, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, because those early years are so critical. And when we see that so many of our early learning centers and childcare businesses are closing or closing classrooms because of access to the CCDF funding or other factors, that is going to really put a pinch on so many families. So how can we make sure that families know what to look for, questions to ask, what questions to ask when they're looking for care to keep their kids safe and on the right track, because it's going to be beneficial for the entire state.
Just to point out real quickly where that conversation just went. We talked about affordability and having to find a way to afford it. And then we ended with Senator Yoder, a laudable goal, again, of professionalizing the career of healthcare providers. You just made that more expensive, right? So understand that there's a give and take there. And if you want professional folks who are educated, maybe even have teacher qualifications, be daycare providers, you're going to make that a lot more expensive than it is today, and probably out of reach for just about any family. And the only possible way to do that would be either for employers to pay it or for the state to lean in and put a lot more money into it.
And the state has, and we've invested in it, and I do think it's important that we do at appropriate levels. And I really think the business community does have an important role to play in this. I appreciate your leadership on it. Just to piggyback on Senator Bray there for a second, I guess I'm so old, I remember when having a neighbor, a family member, or a friend watch your kid in a daycare was okay. And maybe I missed all the dramatic societal consequences of that, and it's completely possible I did. But I mean, I think that we've said now that we have to create this colossal structure And that structure comes with all these costs and it constrains supply, which then means it just makes the user experience even more. I think we've got to find an appropriate balance. I think all four of us are trying to find the appropriate balance. I don't know, this isn't, but in our caucuses are. But I mean, I think we have to be careful because the good intentions create, unintended consequences.
Yeah, and I don't think we're talking babysitting either here. I mean, I think we're talking, as we know, where kids start to develop or at an early age with shapes, colors, and those sorts of things. So there's really more than just watching a kid. There's more to it than that. It's the start of an education and something that, I'll continue to say that we need to invest more in.
Yeah, finding that balance and thinking about how we can be flexible and find innovative solutions, like I think many parts of our state are leaning in around. So before we get to audience questions, I do want to switch over maybe to ask a few questions on infrastructure and economic development. And I guess maybe start with, Indiana has seen significant economic development, including data centers and energy projects, face some delays or kind of changes, and would, I think, talk about finding balance. What is the right balance between local control and speed and efficiency so that our state can take advantage of some of these innovative and exciting opportunities that are going to, contribute to Indiana's future growth?
Well, obviously, I'm a strong supporter of economic development. And look, I think if you care about property taxes, you should care about economic development. If you care about having lower utility rates, you should care about economic development because, again, you're going to amortize expenses and costs across a greater number of folks, and in certain instances, even the highest payers. So, look, I think it's critically important that we do this in concert with our local government partners. I think, again, one of the benefits of SEA 1 is we reward those communities when they do it. In the past, that wasn't always the case. But look, if you want to go to your constituents and say, do you want better local services? Growth is the best way to get that, right? You want lower property taxes? Growth is the best way to get that. And we've created and aligned a system to be able to do that. I always say, like, if you really, like, I think we all care. I know GiaQuinta and I have talked about this before. We both care passionately about, finding the right balance of property taxes and utility costs and those types of things. The fact of the matter is that comes with growth and that comes with having a vision and a plan. And I'm hoping our local community partners are going to get there. And some are already there doing a fantastic job. Some need a little encouragement. I think, having a little siting reform wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have that conversation. Because I think, we have to understand that, like, if this local government, state government is no different than businesses. If you're not growing, you're dying. And you better have that kind of vision and mentality. What's important is to find that right balance for the community. And I totally respect that. I totally respect local control. They don't want 150 legislatures telling them how to do their thing. But we should create incentives and create systems that encourage it. And I think that's why I'm most excited about what SEA 1 did.
I would say, first of all, just piggyback on what the speaker said, is we have to continue to grow. That's where opportunities come from. That's where we can start doing things that we can't do today, and that's growth. We've been able to do that really over the last several years. I've said this statistic, and you all probably in this room know it, but we broke a record in capital investment in 2017. It was a little over $2 billion. We've broken that record every year since then. In 2024, the record was $39 billion. So we're hitting it out of the park with salaries that are paying good wages. With regard to siting reform, we'll continue to look at that. It'll be incremental. I don't think just don't expect a big home run in siting reform at all. It's going to be slow and incremental over years because we're partners with their local government folks. So we don't want to take over what they're trying to do. We've got local government folks that are leaning in a very sophisticated way and others that haven't done so. And ultimately, it comes down to their choice. With something specific like the data centers, we've obviously watched that play out in a couple ways here in Indianapolis, but also in Morgan County, my home county, where they approved one recently, but with vitriolic opposition. And I think we all need to understand data centers and what they are. They can be a good thing. The primary benefit is property tax, and the speaker already accurately kind of portrayed the benefit of that. Morgan County's is to the tune of about $2 billion a year, which is $2 million a year.
Oh, that's one heck of a data center.
That was a heck of a deal. No, $2 million a year, which is not insignificant at all in Morgan County. And, but the things that we need to understand as far as that process plays out is, one, what's the advantage of data centers? Really, it's probably property tax. It doesn't employ a lot of people. It's not a bad neighbor. It doesn't use a lot of services. It's fairly quiet. But there's not about, outside of property taxes, probably not a lot of other benefits. Also has a high use of water and high use of power. So we need to keep all those things in realistic mind when we start talking about whether one of those is going to come to a local area. And for instance, they probably need to think about what their role in providing that water and power is, so that that's not transferred over to other people. The volume is a great benefit for other ratepayers. But whether or not they have to kind of help with the transmission lines and things, I think is a valuable conversation. And the other thing I think is really important is locals and everybody are going to have to rethink the non-disclosure agreements. Those create a high level of distrust. When there is an unknown out there, the public fills it with lots of things that may or may not be accurate. And I just think we've watched that over the last couple of months play out in a way that we're going to have to do that differently with more transparency to the public.
And to piggyback off of what Senator Bray said, I think that question of trust is really what we're talking about here. The governor started in the state of the state saying, Hoosiers' incomes have not kept up. And so when we're talking about, Speaker Huston said, growth is the way to get there. Well, what's happening is that growth isn't being felt by Hoosiers. And then that makes them question whether or not projects are good for their communities. So if we can, what we talked about earlier, bringing in people to have this conversation and have more protections, more guarantees, or more transparency really on what is the benefit to our local communities. I'm just saying that's what I'm hearing from Hoosiers. That's the pushback, is that growth that we talk about, growth, if you're not growing, you're dying. Well, many of our communities are feeling like the promises that were made to them did not come back to their communities. So yes, they are dying, and they are pushing the brakes for any of the other promises that are coming down with some of these big development conversations that we're having. So right or wrong, I'm just saying that issue of trust is real for Hoosiers, but for many communities across this state. And that's what we need to be addressing when we come back into session in January.
But you can't, oh, I'm sorry. No, please. You're good.
Sure, Okay. No, I think it's an interesting question. I think it's a fun topic, frankly, to discuss. I have a Google center up in Allen County that's being developed as we speak. We don't have a real problem so far with water, so we're gonna, that's not really an issue. In fact, they'll be using quite a bit of water eventually to keep the servers cool and all that. And the fact that there's a facility that size that's using that much water is really gonna help us keep water rates down for the rest of us, which is a good thing. And then of course you have to balance the number of construction jobs, which is great, but the part-time jobs, maybe 100 around that. So it's not a lot. And then, and I know there's going to be some other issues with regards to that are coming up with regards to air quality and things like that. So I think it's a fascinating topic, one that's I think interesting to talk about as to what are the necessary and what are the as far as incentives go that the state offers for these, and what is the payback that we're getting as a community. And then we do have the issue with local governments and folks that want input on these things, especially then when it comes to wind and solar and all that. So I'm willing to keep an open mind on these things as we move forward, because I do think it's a fascinating subject, and all the different things that you have to decide whether or not you go forward with these projects. So.
And I just don't think it's, I mean, the hot topic of the day is data centers, but it's about any level of growth. I mean, I'm very, very concerned about housing and the inability to get housing starts in Indiana. And my Senator Yoder, my only response to those local communities when they come and see me is, what are you doing? Like, if you're asking the state, I'm going to turn around and say, what's your permitting process look like? What's your development process look like? Because look, I mean, we have too many instances. We're probably not going to get to housing. I'll just take a minute on this, but we have too many instances where, like, we've stopped housing projects. We've stopped development projects because we are afraid of the unknown. And again, there's a balance. I want to make sure that there is an appropriate balance. Nobody wants master zoning. I didn't mean that. I don't want to make Senator Bray think we've got some big siding bill. Tweaks would be the word, there needs to be consistency in a process, I guess would be, but I think we have to say to our local government partners, and that's what they are, that we're not going to find, new startup housing. They aren't on, every new home isn't going to be, half an acre and brick wrapped. And we have to have a little bit different mentality about this. And again, what I'm most enthusiastic about SCA 1 is they're going to get the benefits of it. Like, they're going to get all the benefits of it. But if you're hesitant, if you don't want to do a project, if you don't want to do housing, then I have to tell you, then I'm going to question how much we are going to partner with you, because I don't know if you really want to improve your community. And I know you're going to get yelled at some local government meetings by people that don't want to change it. I know I served at local government. I've been yelled at before. I was on a planning commission when we were growing pretty quick. But I mean, you got to find that right balance for your community, but closing the door shut because you just don't want to hear somebody complain. And by the way, Phil, GiaQuinta, correct me if I'm wrong, of that water, doesn't like 92% of it get recycled back? Yeah.
I'm hoping they use a little more.
Yeah, but I mean, So again, I think just making people aware, as Senator Bray, both Senator Yoder said, I do think transparency to make people feel better about what's taking place in their communities is important. I think the fact of the matter is you don't need to abate these things like people initially thought. So you're going to really receive all the tax and benefits of it. And the last thing I'll say just specifically about data centers is there's report after report after report. Largest group collection of data centers is Northern Virginia. While they do not oftentimes employ a ton of people, though those 100 jobs are well-paying jobs, latency matters so much that literally companies build, because of AI, companies building near those data centers because they can't, like, split seconds matter. So, like, we need to take a holistic approach. If it's not what people want in their community, so be it. I just want to make sure they understand the full picture of it.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to go to some audience questions before we close.
We got many of them answered
Okay.
throughout, so that's good. And Speaker Huston just touched on housing, so I'll just switch to energy and try to get this one in. How will you address energy affordability in the next 2 to 5 years for businesses and households?
Anyone?
Well, we're working with, we're working with our energy partners on this. Huge concern of all of ours has been the increase in utility rates. There are a lot of different factors that play into that. Ironically, as much as we've been disappointed by those, we actually are trending down in comparison to the national average. Indiana isn't a anomaly in this discussion. It's all across the country. When you've had federal policies yin and yang for the last 2 decades, it creates inconsistencies. So we're working on that. We're looking at a performance-based rate-making process. We think that would be a better process to ensure lower rates. I'd also say this, I mean, if pick on large utility users, when those large utility users come into your communities, they are paying a disproportionate share of the rate in the transmission within that process. So again, that's where I'll go back to, like, we are all collectively incentivized when one of those folks come, because I think I read the narrative that if one of these large utility users comes in, that it's going to cost us more, it'll actually cost us less. And again, basic math would tell you if I'm amortizing a cost, if I can amortize it across the largest number, the single biggest users, and they pay a disproportionate share, then it's better for the individual ratepayer. That's who we're really most focused on, is the individual business ratepayer.
Well, I'll show my hand. I'm looking to bring back something that Senator Garten and I cannot think of the other person who filed this in 2023, but it was legislation to make Indiana a C-PACE state. And it just enables other counties to pass ordinances to be a C-PACE county, which reduces for commercial entities, lowering of energy costs, energy efficiency, investments in their buildings. So please tell me what happened with that bill. We were trying to fix it so we can stitch up anything that was in question or a problem, but looking to file that bill again, and that would give some flexibility for commercial and businesses, corporations across the state, a way to make investments in their property to lower energy costs.
The only thing I'll add is when I just want to be very careful when we're doing things when it comes to the small modular nuclear issues and things like that, that we want to make sure that we're not putting the cost on the ratepayers. And I believe in the bill that we talked about that was passed last spring, last session, in my opinion, put way too much cost up front on the ratepayers. And I just want to make sure that anytime we do things like that, that we're keeping the ratepayer first and foremost in our minds.
I want to just, we always should, absolutely. I also want to note that, again, if you care about energy and you care about the quantity of energy available, and by the way, we don't live in a vacuum. We are part of MISO, so we're partnered with other states, that siting reform matters there too. And I'm not just, how do you get a new natural gas plant built? How do you get the type of energy that I think we all know that there's a greater increase in energy demand? It's like a hockey stick. How are we supporting that in the state, and what role do we have in that?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good place to leave it on. Siting reform is something that I know the chamber, we've been engaged on for a while, and we will keep engaging on it. But I think today's discussion highlights so much, I think, innovation, growth opportunities, maybe some different ways or thoughts on how to do it. But we really thank all of these leaders for being
I thought you were gonna
here.
ask the most important question, which is Northeast Indiana going to get a casino?
But we really appreciate all of you being here this morning and appreciate your leadership and look forward to continuing to work with you. And before we conclude, I also want to mention our gathering that takes place at the midpoint of the legislative session, Chamber Day at the State House. That all-day event will take place on February 10th. It's presented by Thompson Thrift and in partnership with the Indiana Chamber Executives Association. It will feature an array of activities, including the Best in Business Awards Luncheon, featuring the coolest things made in Indiana and the TikTok Small Business of the Year honorees. We'll also have State House meetings, and we'll have a reception at the Indiana Roof Ballroom. You can also prepare for the upcoming legislative session with the Chamber's 2026 Indiana General Assembly Legislative Directory. It's available as a mobile app or the traditional booklet, and all that information can be found at indianachamber.com. Thank you for being here, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. The traffic is the worst. I can't even get
Unfortunately.
Yeah, they don't, it's really hard to train them.
Just missed the